Scooby-Doo.
I always like to have my little notebook.
All right.
Yep, you can have your notebook, and then I'll start this one as well.
So we've got,
We got 20 minutes before this one needs a reset. So I had you there.
oh, sorry, right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's this one that's recording, not the phone.
They're both going.
Okay.
They're both going. That way, if we want to do some fancy.
Editing and.
Fancy editing, we can do a fancy editing.
Got it. Cool, wow, this is great, Peter.
Oh, no problem. So, welcome to your artist talk.
Okay.
Should be, we'll just get started. So I wrote down some questions,
Yeah.
and then we'll have a conversation.
Sounds good.
So, as part of your process, you typically begin, at least I feel like you typically begin with gestural abstraction,
Mm-hmm.
which often consists of an oval, some sort of oval-like figure.
Interesting, yeah.
How does this process help you visualize or consider further processes?
So starting with, like you said, the gestural abstraction,
Yeah.
how does that help me?
How does that get you
Um,
to here?
It provides a starting point that doesn't come from, I suppose, a very concrete problem that I'm trying to solve, which is often what, as a design practitioner, I've often kind of started with a client brief or a certain complex problem that someone needs addressed, and somehow we apply the tools of design to solve that. So working in an MFA context, in a fine arts context, it's a very different situation, especially during this first year of the residency. So improvised forms of drawing or blind drawing, like these gestural abstractions that you made a note of, helps me to just have a starting point that allows me to find meaning within the marks, and consider what possible images might emerge from these, what may seem as completely random scribbles, which in fact they are. They provide, like I said, an important starting point. One thing I started doing last week was I referred to the work of, is it Robert Morris or Richard Morris? The conceptual artist. Anyway.
One of the two.
R. Morris, who, and actually it was John Neff who provided this suggestion of looking at Morris's work, because what Morris does, he creates blind drawings. He actually created a series of what he refers to as blind time drawings over several decades. And he provided a prompt or a type of assignment task for each drawing. So not only did he create a blind contour drawing, but he also sort of was exploring a certain issue through that drawing. And then there was greater meaning within the actual outcome as a result of that. But anyway, going back to the question, I will look for forms in here and use that as a type of composition or as visual elements that I imagine could be enlarged. So I hope that in some way responds to your question, but.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a process question. I think that everyone has some sort of a process. I find it unusual that someone would not, right?
Yeah.
But okay. So I also wrote down that, within your work, and we've talked about this before, you often refer to what you describe as a worldview. Sometimes it's written into the work somewhere, right, in either a grid. And I understand you mean this as kind of a description of a way you codify or understand how humans structure our society and the geographical. So the worldview of your drawings often situates structures either broken or at a precipice. And I was wondering why you think that might be.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been going back and forth with this idea of worldviews over the last several weeks since I arrived in Chicago, and in some ways I don't want to read too much into this, because I'm also aware that there's a lot of complexity in how we experience the world. But by worldview I refer to certain assumptions about knowledge that are just present through educational systems, through the larger culture, through the larger zeitgeist. And I refer to things such as go way back, several centuries back, like the Cartesian coordinate system, the emergence of certain ways of doing geometry, and how the physical world has been structured through that. And I link that with a certain type of rationalism, reasoning, rationality that is also connected to Western philosophy. So I think of that as a type of worldview that certainly has shaped my own understanding of reality. As someone who was raised in a Euro-Canadian context, that's very much the worldview that I'm familiar with. It shapes my understanding of the world. I also, however, refer to philosophers like Hispanic Apache philosopher Viola Cordova, who talks about, who actually critiques that worldview and speaks from the perspective of someone who experiences, for instance, the land or relationship to Earth in a way that it's that's much more relational, perhaps, than the objectified understanding of nature that often we find in what we'll refer to as a global north or western context. So those are some of the ideas that I'm playing with. I'm not, like, again, I'm not trying to specify anything in very concrete terms, but I do believe that gestural art making, different ways of drawing lines, and even referring to the work of, for instance, the artist and Bauhaus teacher Paul Klee, who talked about taking a line for a walk as a way of maybe breaking away from some of these more rigid geometric patterns that we think about in relation to geometry, the urban grid, and more of those linear, rational ways of thinking. So I hope that in some way references the question, but yeah, those are some of the ideas that are in the background when I talk about worldviews and think about these drawings. Yeah.
So, as your work references fantastical spaces, almost otherworldly atmospheres, have you begun to consider expanding outward into third dimensions?
Yes. 3D that we talked a little bit about yesterday. Definitely it's in the back of my mind, and in some cases, actually, I've started to dabble in that a little bit and explore it. There is there's the implications of bizarre and fantastical, as you said, as this might be. There is a suggestion of tangible physical material in some of these drawings. So definitely, it's something I would be very interested in exploring through this residency. Well, I don't know if I'll be doing it within the next couple of weeks, but at some point over the next couple of summers, possibly, maybe even over the fall and spring. I am interested in the relationship, however, between drawing or a two-dimensional surface and the three-dimensional. I think the relationship between the two would be interesting for me anyway, to kind of have that, I don't know if dialogue is the right word, but maybe juxtaposition of something sculptural and something drawn or flat. In the same way that the gestural drawings, I think, I appreciate the way they coexist with a more refined or defined drawing. So yeah.
How do you decide when work is complete?
Good question. I'm not too sure I ever arrive at a place where it's like, this is finished, this is finalized or complete. Often in my filmmaking, it's more certain deadlines for maybe a festival or a commission. Sometimes I just feel I just need to end it because I can't go on. I spent up to 6 years working on this one film, and I remember I just kind of reached a point where it's like, okay, it's not perfect and it's not filmed, but I need to put it out in the world. So sometimes I almost have to impose a certain type of deadline or end point to the work. With work like this is relatively new for me. I've never worked in a residency and studio context. So I've been encouraged so far as part of this residency to not try to finish the work, but simply explore. Having said that, I think even in my filmmaking and animation, I don't mind there being a level of incompletion, if I can say that, in the work. In other words, maybe not fully finalizing it or polishing it, but allowing for things to be somewhat open-ended in interpretation, a bit like this drawing. I mean, I don't think it's finished, but I actually don't mind the fact that there are some blank spaces, allowing maybe for the viewer, in this case it's a drawing, to interpret things or make up for what's missing as they perceive it. And I actually think that filmmaking and art in general, it allows for a little bit of that participation, or allowing for the viewer or audience or person viewing the work to make up for the blank spaces or the areas that might not seem like they're finding us. I think that could be engaging and interesting. Yeah.
All right. One or two more, I think. So I wrote down that, and this is, I've experienced your work since you've been here. And so the medium I most equate with your current work is graphite.
Right.
And I'm just curious if you feel that this carbon derivative has deeper context besides its ubiquity.
Oh man, I wish I had a really good answer for that one. I mean, in some ways, there's very practical reasons for why I use graphite. The familiarity with the medium, ease of use. Like I said, I've used it for many years. I also appreciate that I can use thicker forms of graphite that can cover large areas, but I can also use the pencil. The graphite does lead to obviously a monochromatic black and white aesthetic, which in some ways I think, at least where I'm at right now, I don't mind what it depicts or evokes. That's not to say that I don't want to explore color or go deeper with color. But right now I think, just in terms of this explorative phase, I'm fine with where it's at. Now I think you were hinting at something to do more with materiality with the graphite, or maybe I'm just reading
I
into
think
that.
so. I think, carbon, cultural contexts, fossil fuels, I think these things were all kind of in my mind while examining the pictorial qualities of your work
That's
as well.
interesting. And to be honest, I haven't thought of that, but I actually really appreciate that question, because considering some of the maybe issues of land, even climate change, which I think is implicit in that drawing, I think the carbon is a really interesting connection to me. And I really appreciate that, because I am intrigued as well by the potential relationship between concept and material, or process for making. I think that kind of takes things to another level in terms of what they can suggest. Yeah.
That's pretty much all I had for you.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. I think that was a great
I think
series
that
of
was a
questions.
great start, guys.
And yes, and what I was going to say before we started was that we don't have to go to 30 minutes, I don't think.
No. I think we're
back.
plus there's tape happening in the background.
There we go, yes. Okay, very thoughtful questions. Yeah, that last one with the carbon was really good. I like that.
Use it.
Yes, I am going to use it.